She said, "Why are you acting like a victim? You knew I was still figuring things out." When I asked why she was still sleeping with her ex, I just said, "Thanks for the clarity," and left. She thought I'd come crawling back, until she came home to an empty apartment and an envelope with her own messages printed inside. So, there's a fun little moment in any relationship that's circling the drain. It's the moment you realize you're not just a partner anymore. You've been reclassified as a convenient household appliance with a bank account. My moment of enlightenment came on a Tuesday. It arrived via a text message that was not intended for me, which is probably the most cliché way to discover a betrayal, but I guess the classics are classics for a reason. My girlfriend Clara had a habit of leaving her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I honestly never looked. I have my own sources of digital misery. I don't need to borrow hers. But as I was making coffee, a notification popped up on the screen. It was from a contact named Derek, featuring a profile picture of a man who looked like he'd been aging in a vat of artisanal kombucha. The message read, "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. He suspect anything?" For a normal person, this would be the part with yelling and slammed doors. But I'd been dating Clara for 2 years, and her world wasn't exactly what you'd call normal. It was a special, enchanted place, governed by astrology, auras, and the unwavering belief that her feelings were more important than, say, physics or objective reality. The red flags had been there all along, of course. They weren't just flags, they were giant, illuminated billboards. Like the time she insisted we couldn't go on vacation because Mercury was in a really aggressive retrograde, which apparently meant our plane would be personally attacked by the Roman god of commerce. Or when she explained that her inability to pay her share of the rent was due to a scarcity mindset she was working on, which sounded a lot like what I called being broke. I had chalked it all up to personality quirks. I thought it was charming, in a way. I'd seen her ex Derek a few times. He was a part-time musician and a full-time energy healer who wore a lot of linen and unironically used the word vibe. I was the stable one, the one with a salary and a sensible sleep schedule. I was the bedrock. Turns out, she just liked building her other, more exciting castles on my foundation. I decided to skip the theatrics. I poured my coffee, sat down across from her at the table, and waited for her to finish her morning meditation, or as I called it, her 10 minutes of strategic silence before asking for a favor. When her eyes fluttered open, radiating a tranquility that now seemed deeply offensive, I said, "So, are we in an open relationship now?" Just curious, because I didn't get the memo, and I feel like I should probably update my calendar. She blinked, that serene post-meditation glow curdling into confusion. It was the face of someone whose Wi-Fi had just cut out in the middle of a very important download of universal wisdom. "What are you talking about?" "Derek," I said, taking a slow sip of coffee, "seems very pleased with your recent performance. Wants to know if I, the unsuspecting lead actor in this domestic drama, have figured out the plot twist yet." The color drained from her face. It was fascinating, really. You could practically see the gears in her head grinding, sifting through a mental library of pop psychology excuses to find the right one to absolve her of all responsibility. She landed on one after a few seconds of buffering. She took a deep, calming breath, as if I were the one creating a scene, and adopted the patient tone of a crisis negotiator talking someone off a ledge. "Look," she began, "I know this is hard for you to understand, but I've been going through a lot. Derek and I have a deep, energetic connection. There's history there. I've been trying to figure things out, to find my truth." I just stared at her. It was a masterpiece of emotional deflection. She wasn't cheating. She was on a noble quest for authenticity. I wasn't a betrayed partner. I was a grumpy local villager, standing in the way of her grand expedition to the summit of Mount Self-Actualization. "You're sleeping with your ex-boyfriend," I stated, keeping my voice as flat as the barren plains of her moral landscape. "That's the fact on the table. The rest is just decorative language you learned from a podcast." And then came the line that should be engraved on a monument to gaslighting, right next to, "I'm sorry you feel that way." She looked at me, her head tilted with an expression of profound disappointment, as if I'd just proven myself to be an unevolved Neanderthal. "Why are you acting like such a victim? she said. You knew I was still figuring things out. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I just let her words hang in the air, admiring their sheer, breathtaking audacity. The anger was there, a low hum in the background, but it was completely overshadowed by a much stronger, much funnier feeling. Relief. It was the exhilarating relief of getting a definitive, unambiguous answer. The results were in. The lab had confirmed it. I was dating a crazy person. I stood up from the table. You know what? Thank you, I said. She looked genuinely confused now, her script momentarily forgotten. Thank you for what? For the clarity, I said. It's a real gift. And then I walked out the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently behind me, a gesture of finality she was too self-absorbed to recognize. I heard her call my name, her voice laced with annoyance, not concern. I just kept walking. I went to a coffee shop down the street and sat there with my laptop, the Wi-Fi password a ridiculously long string of inspirational words. It felt fitting. The texts from Clara started almost immediately. First, the angry ones about how I was being childish and avoiding communication. Then the concerned ones about how we needed to hold space for each other's feelings and process this together. It was like being lectured by a fortune cookie that had cheated on you. She genuinely believed I was just taking a walk to cool off. In her intricately constructed worldview, I was the stable, predictable one, the safety net. I paid the bills on time. I remembered to buy toilet paper. I was the solid ground she stood on while her head was in the clouds, figuring things out with Captain Linen Pants. Men like me didn't just leave. We sulked, we got mad, we maybe even punched a wall if we were feeling particularly cinematic. And then we came back and accepted the new, terrible terms of the relationship. Her entire strategy depended on my predictability. And as I sat there, sipping a coffee that tasted like sweet, sweet freedom, I realized she had just handed me the perfect opportunity. She thought she was holding all the cards, but she had just accidentally shown me her entire hand. And it was a terrible, laughable hand. My turning point wasn't some grand emotional breakdown. It wasn't a moment of tearful resolve. It was a calm, logistical decision. I decided to launch a new personal project, a little something to keep me busy. I called it Operation Decoupling. The goal was simple, to surgically remove myself from her life with such precision that by the time she realized I was truly gone, it would be far too late. The revenge wasn't about causing a scene, it was about creating a vacuum. It was about proving that the stable, predictable one could also be ruthlessly efficient. The key to the whole operation was her upcoming weekend yoga retreat in the mountains. She was leaving on a Friday afternoon and wouldn't be back until Sunday night. It was a trip she'd described as essential for realigning her chakras. A glorious 48-hour window. It was perfect. She would leave on a spiritual journey to find her center, and I would use that time to help her find a half-empty apartment. But just moving out wasn't enough. That was only phase 1. Phase 2 was the centerpiece of the whole operation. It was the envelope. I needed to leave her with a parting gift. A little something to remember me by, since she was so fond of history. I needed more than just the one message I'd seen. I needed the whole story. I needed to get back on that laptop, not as a suspicious boyfriend, but as an archivist, a historian preserving a record of her great expedition. I went back to the apartment that evening, my game face firmly in place. Clara was all apologies and calm, therapeutic tones. She'd made dinner, a quinoa salad that tasted like regret. She wanted to talk about establishing healthy boundaries while she was on her journey, so she could have the space she needed. It took every ounce of my self-control not to laugh in her face. I played along. I was remorseful. I was confused. I agreed that we needed to talk more when she got back. I was the perfect wounded partner, just like she expected. I was so convincing, I almost felt bad. Almost. That night, after she was asleep, snoring softly, no doubt dreaming of downward dogs and duplicity, I opened her laptop. It wasn't even password protected. Why would it be? In her mind, her privacy was protected by my complete and utter lack of imagination. It took me less than 5 minutes to find the messaging app. It was a goldmine, a treasure trove. It was the Dead Sea Scrolls of infidelity. The conversation with Derek went back months. It was a rich tapestry of betrayal. There were the flirty messages, the logistical planning for their meetups while I was at work, the explicit recaps of their time together. And then there were the critiques of me. Oh, the critiques were my favorite part. I was emotionally constipated. I was too grounded in the material world. I lacked passion, and my aura was a bit beige. My personal favorite was a text where she complained that I didn't appreciate her spiritual depth. This was sent immediately before she asked Derek if he could get a good deal on some party drugs for a music festival. Deep stuff indeed. I took screenshots. Dozens of them. I documented everything with the meticulous care of a museum curator. I screenshotted every loving exchange, every complaint about me, every plan they made. I saved them all to a flash drive. It was a complete, unabridged archive of her betrayal. My final report. On Friday afternoon, I helped her pack her bag for the retreat. I carried her yoga mat to the car. I kissed her goodbye at the door, a chaste, meaningless peck on the cheek. "Have a great time," I said, my voice dripping with a sincerity I did not feel. "I hope you figure everything out." She smiled, gave me a patronizing little pat on the cheek, and said, "I will. And we'll talk when I'm back. I have a good feeling about us." She drove off, leaving me in a cloud of patchouli-scented exhaust fumes. The moment her car turned the corner, Operation Decoupling began. I had already rented the moving truck online, a 20-foot behemoth that was glorious overkill. My two best friends, Dave and Sam, showed up 10 minutes later. I had briefed them the day before over beers. Their reaction had progressed beautifully from shock to righteous anger to a level of gleeful, conspiratorial enthusiasm that was truly touching. They weren't just friends helping me move, they were my mission support team. "All right," Dave said, rubbing his hands together as he stared at the apartment. "Let's extract the hostage. The hostage is you, by the way." The rules of engagement were simple. My stuff goes, her stuff stays, no damage, no malice. This wasn't about destruction, it was about erasure. We worked with the efficiency of a pit crew. It was a surprisingly complex task, untangling 2 years of a shared life. The kitchen was a nightmare of shared utensils. "Whose is this weird spiralizing vegetable thing?" Sam asked, holding it up. "That's hers," I said. "It's a tool of sadness. Leave it." The bookshelf required careful archaeological work to separate my boring history books from her guides to crystal healing and past life regression. The bathroom cabinet was a minefield. I took my toothbrush and left hers sitting there, a lonely pink monument to her duplicity. We cleared out my side of the closet, my drawers, my desk. The process was cathartic. With every box I packed, I felt lighter. We took the big screen TV, because I had the receipt. We took the espresso machine, a gift from my mother. We left her yoga mat, her meditation cushions, and a half-finished painting she was doing of what she called the color of sound. By Saturday evening, it was done. Every trace of my existence, my clothes, my books, my electronics, my beige aura, had been scrubbed from the apartment. My friends and I stood in the living room, which now had a comical amount of empty space. The couch looked lonely. The walls were bare where my pictures had been. It looked like the apartment had just given up. Then, for the final touch, phase 2. I went to a 24-hour print shop and, using the flash drive, printed every single screenshot on nice, glossy photo paper. Quality was important. I wanted the details to be crisp. I slipped the stack of about 30 pages into a clean, simple manila envelope. On the front, I wrote in black marker, "Clara's figuring things out. Project, research notes." I drove back to the apartment one last time. I walked inside and placed the envelope dead center on the coffee table. It was the only thing on it. It was a statement, a full stop. We did one final sweep, and then we left, locking the door behind us. I drove the truck to my new apartment, a small, aggressively bland place I'd secured that morning. It was empty and had a weird smell, but it was mine. I ordered 3 large pizzas for me and my friends, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely, completely relaxed. I turned my phone off. I spent Sunday in blissful, glorious silence. I unpacked the essentials. I put my coffee machine on the counter. It felt like a sacred act. I didn't think about her at all. The storm hit Sunday night, right on schedule. I turned my phone back on around 10 p.m. to a flood of notifications that almost made the device overheat. 17 missed calls from Clara. 8 missed calls from mutual friends, and then the texts. Oh, the texts. It was a beautiful progression, really. A perfect, real-time case study in psychological meltdown. The first texts were confused, sent at 9:15 p.m. Hey, just got back. Weird question, but where is all your stuff? Did we get robbed? Call me? Then a 10-minute gap. She must have opened the envelope. The 9:25 p.m. text was pure, uncut rage. How could you do this? You are a sick, twisted psycho. I hate you. This was followed swiftly by an attempt at blame shifting at 9:28 p.m. You invaded my privacy. That is the real betrayal here. You went through my things. That's illegal. A personal favorite, that one. The legal analysis of a cornered cheater is always top-notch. Then came the bargaining and the desperate rewriting of history around 10:30 p.m. After an hour of silence from me. You know, I was just confused. It was a mistake. I was always going to choose you. You were supposed to fight for me. You don't just give up on someone you love. And finally, as the hours ticked by and she was met with nothing but a deafening digital void, came the pathetic desperation, starting around midnight. I'm so sorry. I messed up so badly. The apartment is so empty and scary. Please just call me. I miss you. I love you. I read them all, a small sarcastic smile on my face. It was exactly what I had expected. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was just sorry she got caught, and even sorrier that her stable, predictable safety net had packed itself up and walked away. She tried calling for the next 2 days. I let it go to voicemail. The messages were a spectacular mess of tears and accusations and pathetic pleas. On the third day, I decided she'd had enough time to sit in her echoey apartment and process her research notes. I figured it was time to provide my final peer review. She sent one last text that just said, "Please, I'll do anything." I typed out my reply, carefully choosing my words for maximum clarity. "Clara," I wrote, "I'm glad my departure seems to have accelerated your figuring things out process. It's clear from the data that my presence was the primary variable complicating your research. You're welcome. On a separate note, you should probably change your Netflix password. Please lose this number." I hit send. Then I blocked her number. I blocked her on every app. I blocked Derek for good measure, just for my own peace of mind. I sat back on my new, uncomfortable couch in my quiet apartment. I made myself a cup of coffee with my espresso machine. The silence wasn't empty. It was clean. The project was complete. My life was finally, blessedly, clear.